Every lingering question about Donald Trump's connection to Jeffrey Epstein was answered this morning. Newly released emails from the House Oversight Committee are a smoking gun. They reveal everything you need to know, not just that Trump and Epstein were close friends, which is already well documented, so that Trump was aware of what Epstein was doing and chose to do nothing. Now that truth is exploding into one of the biggest scandals yet. We'll break it all down, but first, if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, it really helps support our work. Before diving into Carolyn Leavitt's frantic attempt to deny the facts, let's start with the person who brought this information forward, Representative Robert Garcia.
It's very thin. Release the files today. That should be the response from the White House.
President Trump has said he wasn't a fan of Epstein's. He's called him a creep. He's called the push for more information about Epstein a Democratic hoax. What questions specifically do you have for the president about these emails?
Okay, so what just happened in Texas is absolutely stunning, and I need you to understand how big this is. President Trump is reportedly losing it behind closed doors, screaming at aides, lashing out at everyone around him after a string of devastating setbacks in what's supposed to be his strongest territory, Texas, the heart of MAGA country, the place where Trump should be untouchable. And right now, it's all falling apart. Let me walk you through what happened, because this is wild. First, federal judges just struck down Trump's new Republican-drawn congressional maps as illegal racial gerrymandering. That's a massive legal blow that wipes out a key strategy for maintaining GOP control of Congress. We're talking about maps that were specifically designed to dilute the voting power of Black and Latino voters, and the court said absolutely not. But that's not even the worst part. Trump's own base in Texas is fracturing. MAGA activists, local GOP officials, women's groups that used to be his strongest supporters, they're turning on him. We're seeing protests, petitions against Trump's policies, and open disillusionment spreading through the grassroots organizations that built his movement. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Mary. Thank you, Kevin. Two questions on this. In the interest of transparency, why not just go ahead, release the full files on Epstein, get this all over with?
This administration has done more with respect to transparency when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein than any administration ever. In fact, this administration, the Department of Justice, has turned over tens of thousands of documents to the American people. We are cooperating and showing support for the House Oversight Committee. That's part of the reason you are seeing these documents that were released today, because of the House Oversight Committee's and Republicans' efforts to get these out to the public. This administration also moved, the Department of Justice also moved to unseal grand jury testimony, which we know, unfortunately, a judge declined those requests. So this administration has done more than any, and it just shows how this is truly a manufactured hoax by the Democrat Party. For now, they're talking about it all of a sudden because President Trump is in.
And then there's the public humiliation. Trump has been booed, like loudly and aggressively booed, at recent stadium appearances in Texas. We're talking about sustained rejection from crowds, people turning their backs on him, supporters yelling for him to leave. This isn't happening in California or New York. This is Texas. This is supposed to be Trump's territory. Can you believe this? The combination of these three things, the court defeat, the base fracturing, and the public booing, has apparently sent Trump into a rage spiral. Sources are describing him as screaming, shouting at staff, demanding to know who's responsible for this disaster. And honestly, there's no easy answer, because this isn't one person's fault. This is a fundamental crack in Trump's political foundation. The court ruling came down on November 18th from a panel of federal judges who looked at the new Texas congressional maps and saw exactly what voting rights advocates have been warning about. These maps were drawn to weaken minority voting power. The judges said the maps diluted the voting strength of Black and Latino voters and had to be thrown out. That's not spin or interpretation. That's the legal finding of a federal court. Now, why does this matter so much? Because Texas is crucial for Republican control of Congress. The state has dozens of congressional seats, and how those district lines are drawn determines who wins those seats. Republicans were counting on these gerrymandered maps to lock in their House majority. Well, those maps just got tossed in the trash by federal judges. Trump's team is scrambling because this ruling doesn't just affect Texas. It sends a signal to courts across the country that aggressive racial gerrymandering won't be tolerated. Other states with similar Republican-drawn maps are now vulnerable to legal challenges. The dominoes could start falling everywhere. But here's what's really got Trump melting down. It's not just a legal loss, it's what's happening with his own people. Texas MAGA organizers are joining national protests against Trump. Women's groups that were core to his coalition are signing petitions opposing his latest policies. Social media is full of longtime Trump supporters expressing disappointment and frustration. The cracks in the base are becoming impossible to ignore, and they're happening in real time where everyone can see them. The booing incidents are particularly humiliating because they're so public and so visceral. Video evidence shows Trump appearing at rallies and sporting events in Texas and getting loudly rejected by crowds. Not polite silence, not scattered boos mixed with cheers, sustained, aggressive rejection, people turning their backs, supporters or former supporters yelling at him to leave. In Texas, in a state he won by double digits. That's supposed to be home turf, and he's getting treated like an unwelcome visitor. Top Republican strategists are apparently freaking out about what this means for 2026. Even Ted Cruz, one of Trump's most loyal allies, is reportedly urging the party to take the political peril seriously. When Ted Cruz is worried about Trump's position in Texas, you know something fundamental has shifted. Cruz saw the massive No Kings demonstrations, saw the millions of frustrated voters, and realized this isn't a temporary blip. This is a warning sign that the GOP's southern stronghold might not be as solid as everyone assumed. The timing of all this couldn't be worse for Trump. He's dealing with multiple legal battles, congressional investigations, and now his political base is showing cracks in a state that's supposed to be his firewall. If Texas starts trending away from Trump, even a little bit, the entire Republican electoral math falls apart. Texas isn't supposed to be competitive. Texas is supposed to be locked down. But right now, it's looking more uncertain than it has in decades. So we're going to break down exactly what this court ruling means, why the MAGA base is fracturing, what those booing incidents tell us about Trump's grip on his coalition, and what all of this signals for the 2026 elections, because this isn't just another bad news day for Trump. This is a potential turning point that could reshape American politics. And trust me, you're going to want to understand every angle of this story. All right, let's dig into the details, because each piece of this Texas disaster is significant on its own, but together they paint a picture of real political crisis for Trump and the Republican Party. Let's start with the court ruling on the congressional maps, because that's the most concrete and legally significant development. On November 18th, a panel of federal judges issued a ruling that struck down Texas's new Republican-drawn congressional maps. The judges found that these maps constituted illegal racial gerrymandering, specifically that they diluted the voting strength of Black and Latino voters in violation of the Voting Rights Act and the Constitution. This wasn't a close call or a technicality. The judges looked at how the district lines were drawn and concluded that the map makers had intentionally weakened minority voting power to benefit Republican candidates. That's textbook racial gerrymandering, and it's illegal. Now, here's why this matters for Trump specifically. These maps were drawn with the explicit goal of helping Republicans maintain control of the House of Representatives. Texas gained congressional seats after the 2020 census because of population growth, largely driven by Latino residents, by the way, and Republicans saw an opportunity to lock in those extra seats for the GOP. They drew maps that packed minority voters into a few districts while spreading them thin in others, ensuring that white Republican voters would control as many districts as possible. Trump's team was counting on these maps. Their entire strategy for holding the House in 2026 relied partly on having favorable district lines in Texas. Well, that strategy just got blown up by federal judges. The maps have to be redrawn, and any new maps will be subject to court review to ensure they don't repeat the same constitutional violations. That means Republicans might actually have to compete fairly in some of these Texas districts, a prospect that apparently terrifies them. The broader implications are significant too. This ruling establishes a precedent that aggressive racial gerrymandering will face serious legal consequences. Other states with Republican-drawn maps, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, are now looking at potential challenges using similar legal arguments. The Texas ruling gives voting rights advocates a template for attacking gerrymandered maps across the country. And if multiple states have their maps thrown out, the entire landscape of the 2026 elections could shift dramatically. But the court ruling is only part of what's causing Trump's meltdown. The fracturing of his base in Texas is arguably even more alarming from a political standpoint, because it suggests something is fundamentally broken in the relationship between Trump and his most loyal supporters. We're seeing Texas-based MAGA organizers joining national protests against Trump's policies. These aren't liberals or Democrats. These are people who were the backbone of Trump's movement. They knocked on doors, made phone calls, organized rallies, convinced their neighbors to vote for Trump, and now they're out protesting against him. Women's groups that were central to Trump's coalition are signing petitions opposing his administration's actions. Social media is full of longtime Trump supporters expressing frustration, disappointment, even betrayal. The sentiment seems to be that Trump has forgotten the people who put him in power, that he's pursuing policies that hurt the very communities that supported him most strongly. What's causing this fracture? It's hard to pin down one specific issue because different groups have different grievances. Some are upset about economic policies that haven't delivered the promised benefits. Some are frustrated with Trump's handling of various controversies. Some feel like Trump has been co-opted by establishment Republicans and isn't fighting for the populist agenda he promised. Whatever the specific reasons, the result is the same. Grassroots MAGA activists in Texas are increasingly disenchanted, and they're not hiding it. This creates a serious problem for Trump and Republicans heading into 2026. Political campaigns depend on enthusiastic volunteers to do the ground level work of organizing voters. If MAGA activists are sitting on their hands or worse, actively protesting, the Republican turnout machine in Texas gets weaker. And in close elections, ground game matters enormously. The enthusiasm gap that used to favor Republicans in Texas might be narrowing or even reversing. Then there are the booing incidents, which are perhaps the most viscerally humiliating aspect of this entire situation. Video footage shows Trump appearing at recent events in Texas and receiving sustained, aggressive rejection from crowds, people booing loudly, people turning their backs, people shouting for him to leave. This isn't the kind of polite disapproval you might see in a mixed crowd. This is open hostility from people who presumably paid to be at these events. Why is this happening? Part of it might be frustration with Trump's policies or behavior. Part of it might be disappointment that he hasn't delivered on promises. Part of it might just be that people are tired of the constant chaos and controversy that surrounds Trump. Whatever the reasons, the optics are devastating. Trump's entire political brand is built on the idea that he's beloved by real Americans, that the silent majority supports him, that his rallies are packed with adoring fans. When he gets booed in Texas of all places, that brand takes a serious hit. The psychological impact on Trump himself shouldn't be underestimated either. Sources describe him as screaming at aides, demanding explanations, lashing out at anyone nearby. Trump has always been obsessed with crowd sizes and audience reactions. He needs that validation from supporters. When he gets booed instead of cheered, it clearly affects him deeply. An angry, rattled Trump is more likely to make mistakes, pick unnecessary fights, and alienate potential allies. That could make his political problems even worse. Top Republican strategists are reportedly alarmed by all of this. They're seeing warning signs that Texas might actually be competitive in upcoming elections. Ted Cruz, who's usually one of Trump's most reliable defenders, is urging the party to take the political peril seriously. Cruz saw the massive No Kings demonstrations that have been spreading across the country. He's hearing from constituents who are frustrated and angry. He recognizes that millions of voters who supported Republicans in the past are now questioning that support. When Ted Cruz is worried about Texas, every Republican should be paying attention. The combination of legal defeats, base fracturing, and public rejection creates a feedback loop that could accelerate Trump's problems. The court ruling energizes voting rights advocates and demoralizes Republican activists. The base fracturing reduces volunteer enthusiasm and turnout. The booing incidents damage Trump's brand and create negative media coverage. Each problem makes the others worse. And here's the thing. Texas was supposed to be the Republican firewall. It's the second largest state, it has enormous electoral significance, and it's been reliably Republican for decades. The entire GOP electoral strategy assumes Texas is safe. If that assumption starts looking shaky, Republicans have to rethink everything. They have to spend resources defending Texas instead of focusing on swing states. They have to worry about turnout in a state they previously took for granted. The whole map shifts if Texas becomes competitive. Democrats are obviously watching all of this very closely. They've been investing in Texas for years, trying to build the infrastructure for eventual competitiveness. Progress has been slow, but what's happening now suggests their patience might pay off. If Trump's own supporters are turning on him, if his base is fracturing, if he's getting booed at events, that creates opportunities Democrats can exploit. The 2026 midterms suddenly look a lot more interesting than they did a month ago. The national implications extend beyond just electoral politics, too. The court ruling on the maps is part of a broader fight over voting rights and fair elections. The base fracturing reflects deeper tensions within the Republican coalition about what the party stands for and who it serves. The public rejection of Trump shows that even his most loyal supporters have limits. All of these dynamics will shape American politics for years to come, regardless of what happens in any specific election. So yeah, this Texas situation is a genuine crisis for Trump. It's not just bad headlines or temporary setbacks. It's a combination of legal, political, and personal problems that threaten his grip on power and his party's dominance in a crucial state. The question now is whether Trump can recover or whether this marks the beginning of a more fundamental decline. Okay, let's break this down into clear points so everyone understands exactly what's happening and why it matters so much for Trump's political future. Point number one, the court ruling on Texas maps is a devastating legal and political defeat. Federal judges don't strike down congressional maps lightly. When they do, it means the evidence of illegal gerrymandering was overwhelming. The ruling specifically found that the maps diluted the voting power of Black and Latino voters. That's a constitutional violation that courts take very seriously. This ruling forces Republicans to redraw the maps under court supervision, meaning they can't just repeat the same gerrymandering tactics. The new maps will have to actually reflect the demographic reality of Texas, which includes a large and growing minority population. That likely means more competitive districts and potentially more seats for Democrats. The strategic implications are huge. Republicans were counting on these gerrymandered maps to maintain their House majority. Without them, they have to actually win votes in districts they thought they rigged in their favor. That requires money, resources, and enthusiasm, all of which are now in question given what else is happening in Texas. The ruling also empowers legal challenges to similar maps in other states. Voting rights advocates now have a successful template for attacking racial gerrymandering. Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, any state where Republicans drew maps to dilute minority voting power could face similar lawsuits. The dominoes could keep falling throughout 2026, reshaping congressional districts across the country. Point number 2, the MAGA base fracturing is a grassroots rebellion that threatens Trump's political machine. Trump's power has always depended on the intensity of his base. His supporters weren't just voters, they were volunteers, organizers, evangelists who recruited their friends and family. That enthusiasm gap was Republicans' secret weapon. Democrats might have more total voters, but Trump's people showed up reliably and worked harder. When that base starts fracturing, when MAGA activists join protests against Trump, when women's groups that supported him start signing petitions opposing his policies, the entire equation changes. Ground game wins close elections. If Republican volunteers in Texas are demoralized or actively opposed to Trump, Democratic candidates get an advantage they haven't had in decades. Doors don't get knocked, phone calls don't get made, and turnout suffers. The specific grievances driving this fracture vary, but the common thread seems to be disappointment. People who believed Trump would fight for them feel abandoned. People who expected economic benefits haven't seen them materialize. People who wanted Trump to drain the swamp think he's become part of it. Whether those perceptions are fair or not, they're spreading through Trump's base, and that's politically dangerous. Point number 3, the public booing represents a collapse in Trump's personal brand and mystique. Trump has always presented himself as universally beloved by real Americans. His rallies were supposed to be celebrations of his popularity, proof that the silent majority supported him despite what the media said. When he gets booed in Texas, that narrative crumbles. The video evidence is impossible to spin away. People can see with their own eyes that crowds in Trump country are rejecting him. That undermines the entire myth of Trump's invincibility and his connection with ordinary Americans. It also clearly affects Trump personally. Sources describe him screaming at aides after these incidents, demanding to know who's responsible, lashing out at everyone around him. Trump needs adulation. It's central to his psychology and his political brand. When he's rejected instead, he becomes erratic and angry, which often leads to mistakes that make his problems worse. Point number 4. Top Republicans are genuinely alarmed about what this means for 2026. When Ted Cruz tells the party to take the political peril seriously, that's significant. Cruz is a political survivor who understands Texas better than almost anyone. If he's worried, other Republicans should be terrified. The party has been assuming Texas is safe, that they could focus resources on swing states while counting on Texas as a reliable base. That assumption now looks questionable. If Republicans have to spend money defending Texas, they have less to spend elsewhere. If they have to worry about turnout in Texas, they can't take anything for granted. The No Kings demonstrations and other protests have shown that millions of voters are angry enough to take to the streets. Converting that anger into votes is the challenge, but the raw material for a political upheaval clearly exists. Point number 5. The 2026 implications are enormous and extend far beyond Texas. Control of the House might hinge on what happens in Texas congressional races. If the new maps are fairer, Democrats could pick up multiple seats. If Republican turnout drops due to base fracturing, races that seem safe become competitive. If Trump's toxicity spreads, even strong Republican candidates could struggle. The Senate map in 2026 also includes Texas. If any special circumstances arise, even if no Senate seat is directly on the ballot, the political environment in Texas affects races across the country. Republican candidates everywhere will have to decide how closely to align with Trump, knowing that his brand is damaged in what was supposed to be his strongest territory. Democrats will try to nationalize the Texas situation, arguing that if even Texas is turning against Trump, voters everywhere should reject him. Whether that argument works remains to be seen, but the fact that it's even plausible represents a massive shift in the political landscape. Point number 6. This crisis reveals fundamental weaknesses in Trump's political coalition. Trump built his movement on intensity rather than breadth. He had fewer supporters than Democrats, but his supporters were more passionate and more engaged. That worked as long as the intensity held, but intensity is hard to maintain, especially when promises go unfulfilled and controversies pile up. What we're seeing in Texas might be the beginning of intensity fatigue. People who were ride or die Trump supporters 4 years ago are now questioning whether it's worth it. They're tired of the drama, disappointed by the results, and frustrated by the chaos. That doesn't mean they'll vote Democrat, but they might stay home, and in close elections, that's enough to flip outcomes. The lesson for other Republicans is that Trump's coalition is more fragile than it appeared. Building a political movement around one person's personality and grievances creates dependence on that person maintaining their appeal. When the appeal fades, there's nothing else holding the coalition together. So where does this leave us? Trump is facing a genuine crisis in Texas, legal defeats, base fracturing, public rejection that threatens his political future and his party's dominance in a crucial state. The court ruling on maps removes a key strategic advantage Republicans were counting on. The grassroots rebellion reduces the volunteer enthusiasm that powers turnout operations. The booing incidents damage Trump's brand and his psychological stability. And top Republicans are openly worried about what all of this means for 2026. Is this the end for Trump? Probably not. He survived countless crises before, but this feels different because it's happening in territory that was supposed to be unquestionably his. Texas was the firewall. Texas was the proof that MAGA country would never abandon Trump. Well, Texas is now showing cracks, and those cracks could spread to other states where Trump's support seems solid. The coming months will reveal whether this is a temporary setback or the beginning of a more fundamental decline. Congressional elections in 2026 will test whether the Republican advantage in Texas has eroded. Future Trump appearances will show whether the booing incidents were isolated or part of a pattern, and the redrawn congressional maps will reveal just how much the court ruling reshapes the political landscape. What's clear right now is that Trump is rattled, his base is fracturing, and his political position is weaker than it's been in years. The man who seemed invincible in Republican politics is suddenly looking vulnerable in his own stronghold. That's not just bad news for Trump, it's a potential earthquake in American politics. So yeah, keep watching Texas, because what happens there over the next year could determine the direction of the entire country. Are you kidding me? This is absolutely wild, and we're just getting started.